and a very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with Frank Rausam Pereira. And since you're here, I would like to thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. Here are the UPI IDs for those of you who would like to come forward and contribute. They are also in the description of this video along with the other details. A small contribution you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. So do continue to show your love and support. Now, the coronavirus pandemic has triggered an unprecedented situation, and India is not looking at medical supplies and assistance by its partners and friends in terms of any policy framework, Foreign Secretary Harsh Vardhan Shringla said on Thursday. At a media briefing, he said India had supplied essential pharmaceutical products including hydroxychloroquine, paracetamol, and even remdesivir to geographies across the globe in view of the pandemic, and the countries have now come forward to help India. His response came to questions on whether there was a shift in India's policy of not accepting foreign aid that was enunciated after the 2004 tsunami. Around 40 nations across the world, including all major powers like the US, Russia, Japan, France, Germany, and the UK, have announced medical supplies and assistance to help India deal with the second wave of the coronavirus pandemic that has devastated many parts of the country. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze India's foreign aid policy. Joining me on the program today are Dilip Sinha, former ambassador, Shakti Sinha, director, Delhi School of Public Policy and Governance, and KP Nair, strategic analyst. Thank you to my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Ambassador, let me start the program with you first. Let's understand and analyze, is there a change in India's foreign aid policy or not? Because the media seems to be reporting that there is a change, whereas the foreign secretary has come out and said that there is no change. It is just that it's a time of need, and hence countries around the world are just helping each other out.
I don't think there's any change in our foreign aid policy. Any foreign aid has to be based upon the country's resources and capacity to give aid. At present, India is going through a crisis situation. So obviously, any export or any kind of assistance that we offer will be impacted by our current problems. But I don't think there's any change in the long-term policy, which is based upon the fact that we have certain capacity to help other countries in certain fields, given our limited resources, but our skills in certain areas. And we are always willing to offer that to fellow developing countries. That's been our policy for a very long time. In fact, our ITEC program started over 50 years ago, when we were not even considered to be an emerging market or an emerging economy. From that time onwards, we've had certain skills and certain products that we can offer. So we have been offering that depending upon our limited resources. So I don't see, a short answer to your question is, I don't see any change in our policy on foreign aid.
All right, Mr. Nair, let me bring you into the picture now. Are you also of the same opinion that the world is going through a rough phase right now, and governments around the world are just helping each other out in this time of need? Some are reluctant, of course. We've seen in the recent past that, they have not been very forthcoming with the help. But after a lot of domestic and social pressure, we've seen them come out and at least offer to help. So how would you look at this issue?
Yes, I am of the same view, but India's policy on accepting foreign aid is something that has puzzled me for quite some time, even before all this happened. My two colleagues, Shakti and Dilip, have been with the government, so maybe they can enlighten me and your viewers on this. I have never understood the rationale behind a change in foreign policy that was enunciated by the Manmohan Singh government. Before the Manmohan Singh government changed the policy to the effect that we will not accept foreign aid, India was open to foreign aid. India has accepted foreign aid on a number of occasions, the Gujarat earthquake, so many other occasions. So I have never understood the rationale for stopping the policy, I mean, stopping the receipt of foreign aid. And now we are paying a price for it, you know. I mean, I am from the state of Kerala, and we had this devastating flood 2 years ago. Now it has become an annual occurrence, and the UAE government offered 700 crores, if I remember right, in foreign aid, and we refused. You see, I mean, I don't see what is the logic in standing on prestige. If friends want to offer us aid, and now we have to go through all these counter-attempts, you know, to just, I mean, we need the aid desperately. We need oxygen, medical equipment, medicines, but there is this unseemly sight of foreign secretary having to justify this. And then there is this, I mean, we have very serious issue on our hands, and we are going through this discussion on whether there is a change of foreign policy, whether there should be a change in foreign policy. And you see, since the decision by the Manmohan Singh government probably was taken at the cabinet level, the foreign secretary, when he was asked at his briefing 3 days ago, he couldn't say there was a change when there was actually a change, because he couldn't say there was a change because it was probably a cabinet decision, and it is beyond his pay grade to say that there is a change. So when all this has settled down, I think that we, at the appropriate level, we should look at this whole issue again. And I think we should go back to the pre-Manmohan Singh government policy of accepting foreign aid where people are offering it in good faith.
Okay, points taken. Since you opened up the debate, let's take this point forward. Mr. Sinha, let me take this particular aspect to you now. So, what are your thoughts? Should we go back to an era where we get aid, like Mr. Nair has just pointed out and given the example of the UAE? If someone is willing to, why not?
Frank, I'll just correct KP on one thing. The decision was actually taken when Jaswant Singh was the foreign minister. He shut down most of the foreign aid agencies and said, you're giving a pittance $50 million, $25 million a year and giving us advice. The reason was very clear. A lot of this money came with strings attached. Supposing Government of India has a big program costing 500 crores, or a state government has, the foreign donor gives 50 crores out of 500 crores. 10%. Okay, at 10% is not bad. At the margin, you need the money. But that 10% brought them a seat on the table to tell me how to run the policy, how to run other things also. So this was a debate going on in a long time. After which they said, fine, unless you're a big donor, please shut shop and go home, go to better places where your money is more required. It was a conscious decision taken. We did give an exception after that at the tsunami time also, though initially we said we don't want it. But then UNDP and others, UNICEF did work on tsunami, because initially we said we want nobody. Now, the multilaterals have continued, the World Bank, the UN agencies have continued. Bilateral had stopped. This is an exceptional case. What is happening is not shortage of money so much. None of us are looking for money even today. What we're looking for is a medical supply, the oxygen generation machines, the concentrators, the cylinders, etc., etc. This is clearly an exception case. I would be a little skeptical on opening the door once again. If you have a clearly articulated policy, which actually we don't, then you could lay down conditions in advance. If fine, you can work with us on these grounds alone. Because yes, an emergency, it's fine with one thing, but if it comes with too many strings attached, which preempt your other resources, that is where I think we will have to draw the line somewhat. And the UAE actually was edgy about the 700 crores. Kerala announced it. UAE was a little edgy about the money also. They were not very forthcoming about it. But yes, in an emergency, we must open up.
So, taking the discussion forward, then, let me go back to a point that I was referring to a little earlier. Ambassador, do we now also know who our true friends are? and who the pseudo friends are, because we saw this entire issue with the United States and that particular episode cropping up as well. We saw then the Indian community in the United States lobby hard against the government there to try and come out and help India in this hour and in this time of need. The US calls India a strategic partner, but what we saw in the recent past did not seem like they were behaving like a partner. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, every country follows a certain policy depending upon its national interests. In the case of the US, the big pharma, the big companies over there dictate a lot of their policies, keeping in mind their company interests. Now, in this particular situation, obviously what you say is correct. In this situation, we have realized who are our true friends and who are not, especially those who are very quick and immediate in providing us relief. But I must say, even the US has responded to the pressures that came upon the government from the people, as well as from certain other, not only people of Indian origin, but also other people who felt that the US should relax its conditions. And I'm glad that the US has done so. But I think I misunderstood your question the first time when you answered. I was thinking more about India's aid to other countries. As far as accepting foreign aid is concerned, I agree that in such situations as we have today, accepting foreign aid is not only sensible, but also the humanitarian thing to do, because every country at a certain stage of its, if there's a calamity, needs assistance, just as in every individual does. Now, as far as the long-term policy is concerned, it's for government to decide whether for its own public sector projects, it needs any foreign assistance or not. But as far as aid coming into individual organizations is concerned, there is no doubt that this government has tightened the screws on different individuals and organizations taking assistance from outside. For example, a lot of regulations have been put in. Accounts have to be opened in specific banks, and the money can only be siphoned through those. So a lot of restrictions have been placed. I don't think they are quite necessary. I know there are some countries that misuse the funds that they send in, they put in conditionalities. But the fact also remains that in any case, countries that want to create trouble can always siphon money through various other ways they want to. Whoever takes in money through official sources, through banking channels, in any case is accountable for the money that the organization gets. And I don't see any reason why government should step in and create all kinds of hurdles. Countries have benefited greatly from assistance. Our neighboring country, Bangladesh, allows such assistance to come in. And today, Bangladesh has overcome most of its problems. In fact, its per capita income is going to cross India's very soon. So there's no point now sitting on a high horse and saying that we don't need any assistance from abroad. When we do, we certainly have money for fancy projects, but we also have a lot of people who are below the poverty line who need all kinds of assistance. And if somebody is willing to assist, I think we should open up and permit that.
Right. So, Mr. Nair, let's talk about another aspect. There have been several nations that have come forward to help us and have done so without any push or pull. They have done so very, very, with an open heart and with open arms. In such a situation, when we look at this particular aspect as a whole, would you say that India's goodwill also of India providing the hydroxychloroquine when the world needed it, Remdesivir when they needed it, paracetamol, and so many other things. India also helped the world out when they needed us. So, is this just something that is being done in reciprocity? That the goodwill that India has shown or the India has gained, we've converted that into gains now.
I don't think it is a question of reciprocity, because this is a crisis. This is a crisis that is affecting the whole world. It's not just one country. COVID-19, the pandemic, is a global crisis. So, if you look around the world, countries have been helping each other. So, many countries have opened their hearts and opened their arms and opened their purse strings to help others. So, there is, I think, generally, internationally, there is a movement, or there is an effort to help countries that are in need. But India, of course, has a lot of goodwill. India has a long tradition of helping needy countries from the time of soon after independence, when we were not so well off as we are today. When we were actually when we were receiving PL 488, because there was not enough food in India to feed our people. Even at that time, Jawaharlal Nehru gave aid to other countries, and we helped African liberation movements against colonialism, not in the political sense, you see. People who were under the yoke of colonialism and were fighting, we tried to actually help them. Look at the number of scholarships that we have given students from poor countries. So it's not just aid in the sense of cash or food or anything. I mean, you are helping build up a new generation. I mean, in African countries, wherever you go, you have people who. I mean, you go to Ethiopia. You go to Ethiopia even now. You see people everywhere. Oh, I went to Pune. I studied in Pune. I once had the experience of traveling from Arusha in Tanzania after a UN conference to Dar es Salaam. And the gentleman sitting next to me was the editor of a Tanzanian newspaper. And he told me, oh, I studied in the Indian Institute of Mass Communications in Delhi. And believe me, a few years later, he became the foreign minister of Tanzania. And later, he became the president of Tanzania. So we have this goodwill of having given aid even when we could not afford to give it. So it is a little unfortunate that lately our aid budgets have been cut, especially for African countries. I hope that the way 40 countries have now come forward to help us with no strings attached, opening the purses, I hope it will persuade us after all this is over to restore our aid budget and realize that we need to continue to give aid. We need to share what we have with countries that are in greater need. I hope we will do that when all this is over.
Absolutely. While all of this is happening, a certain neighbor of ours doesn't seem to be wanting to help at all. In fact, it has only made things even more difficult. Mr. Sinha, the Sichuan Airlines has been stopped from bringing supplies to India. How would you look at that? I mean, it seemed during the first wave, we saw China taking advantage of the situation. We saw the entire Eastern Ladakh issue flare up. Now, again, during the second wave, it looks like China is up to its antics yet again.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. Of course, Sichuan then one day later reversed its stand and said, no, we will fly to India, not to worry. But yeah, the signaling was all wrong. Signaling was all bad at this moment of time. This was not about the moment of people. It basically wanted to show up India. It basically wanted to embarrass India. I mean, we sometimes forget that, these countries, as somebody wrote in an article I read the other day, most countries are very comfortable dealing with India other than two countries, China and Pakistan. I think this is something we have to understand, that this is the structural issue. It is not that if you talk to them nicely, they'll be nice to you. So they would go out of the way to embarrass you. And therefore, all the more reason for you is to see that problem and deal with other countries and develop much better equations with them, so that such embarrassments that they want to cause, you can override them by having alternate sources available to you. Yes, China is a very large source of a lot of things that we need. We buy them. It's commercial dealing, right? We're buying them. We're not asking, begging for them, right? But therefore, in order to avoid it, you must develop more resilient supply chains, so that therefore even this opportunity for them to embarrass you is at least kept in control. But just to add to a bit of what KP was saying, yes, we have increased our foreign aid budget this year. The development cooperation, the money that we give out, it was falling for a number of years. It has now been stepped up in the last budget by Finance Minister, where she has allocated more than 7,100 crores, plus about another 500 crores for ITech, where people come to study in India or do short-term courses, etc. So I think there is a rethinking going on, but we definitely need to engage with the world more in terms of sharing our development experience and giving them our expertise. So I think the two go together. You are being open to the world when you need their help, and also contribute to the world where others need it. That's a two-way traffic all the time. And therefore, when India did your earlier question, India supplied last year, that was publicly stated by President Biden himself. If when we needed it, India came to our rescue, and therefore we have to respond to India's demands. So that is the way to deal with countries, two particular countries who will go out of the way to embarrass you, whatever happens.
Absolutely. Another aspect that I want to bring in, and I'm going to be taking closing comments from all my panelists as well right now. Ambassador, this whole issue of IPR, what Bill Gates has said, and how private companies look at this particular issue as, as a whole, and what is the limitation as far as foreign governments are concerned? How would you look at this entire issue?
The IPR issue has been a long-standing issue in almost all sectors, especially so in pharma, where human life and human health is involved. We have taken certain stand, but we must be fair to the companies that do research. They spend billions of dollars in research, and most formulae that they develop do not necessarily make money for them. So they have to recover their cost from whatever is the successful formulation that they prepare. But there are already avenues available within the law, within the TRIPS agreement, for example. You have compulsory licensing is available. Government can compensate the company and buy the patent rights and open it up, which our government can also do in the case of Covaxin, for example, which is an Indian invention, discovery, and that can be done. So there are ways in which governments can step in. In the case of a pandemic like this, compulsory licensing can also be introduced. So there are ways that governments have introduced even within the international agreements. It is possible to do so. But the larger issue of promoting R&D, which is extremely important, everybody complains about the US, but the fact is that the US also does a lot of research in medicines. And they're all largely in the private sector. There's a lot of government assistance also available there. So while we formulate our policies, we must also keep in mind that our expenditure on R&D is very low, and we have to find ways of increasing that so that we don't depend upon foreign research only for our needs.
Absolutely. What's the best way forward, Mr. Nair?
I think we are going in the right direction. We are, although we don't want to acknowledge that there is a change in our policy on foreign aid, we are doing what is necessary. Aid is coming in, especially aid in materials that are most needed. We are doing the right thing, for example, by diverting ships. Two ships have been naval ships have been diverted to Bahrain, and another to Qatar and to Kuwait. So we are mobilizing everything. But on the way forward, I would like to make one point, since you brought in China a little earlier. I won't be very popular saying this, but I don't believe anything that appears in a section of our Indian media about China. We have to acknowledge a very strong anti-China lobby, which is by and large operating at the behest of another country. I don't want to mention that country. It's not a neighboring country, it's a big power. So, see, we have to realize, and this is the time for common sense, we have to realize that China is our neighbor. China has the ability to help us for geographic reasons. And I think we made a lot of mistake in banning so many things from China. Who suffered? We suffered. The medicines that we wanted, the material that we needed, suddenly we realized we were not getting it from China for our medicine manufacture. We realized we are not getting things for manufacturing our telephones. At the end of the day, geography, we cannot change the geography. We have to deal with China. And in this particular case, one newspaper and one TV channel mentioned that China was creating problems for these aircraft to transport equipment. Later on, it turned out that it was not true. So maybe this is an occasion to review some of the mistakes that we have made in dealing with China. And if if China is willing to cooperate with us, I am not saying that we should beg. If China is willing to cooperate with us, we should take a fresh look at some of our links with China. And remember, China, countries like China, Iran, they have consistency in foreign policy, in external relations. The United States has no consistency. Trump comes, you make a 180-degree turn in foreign policy. Biden comes, you make another 180-degree turn. But countries, great civilizations like Iran and China, they have consistency, which they have followed for centuries in their external relations. So maybe the way forward is for us to take a fresh look in the context of the pandemic on how we deal with China.
All right. And Mr. Sinha, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
I think what we need is formulate a policy on foreign aid. We need definitely not for the Union government alone, but the state governments also. Some of whom in emergencies, 500 crores makes a lot of difference. Government of India's budget, 500 crores doesn't even show up. It's such a small item, right? So we need a clearly articulated policy to help us deal and under what conditions do we want it. And yes, open up to the world. But yes, China can cooperate with us very well. It can vacate the territory in Ladakh. It has occupied the territory, not of country far away. China can really do that. That will really be very useful to us, not just in passing. But I think the fact of the matter is, in an interconnected world, India has a lot to contribute. But yes, when India needs, we definitely should welcome assistance from outside within a given framework that is transparent and known to everybody. So therefore, there is no element of ad hocism, there is no element of favoritism or bias coming into the picture. That is what I would think would be the best approach.
All right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time. Thank you. Thank you, all of you. Thank you so very much. Have a good week ahead. Nowadays, we don't know what is a Sunday, what is a Monday. It's all the same. It doesn't matter.
I know. But I'm glad you changed it from yesterday evening to today.
Is concerned, but us accepting aid after a span of 17 years is more of a one-off thing. In these unprecedented times, nations are helping each other out since the virus is not a localized problem. And if we have to get rid of it, we have to get rid of it from the entire world. We have also realized who our friends are, real ones, and who the pseudo friends are. We need to recalibrate our foreign policy accordingly. Once again, thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter to get incisive content. Here are the UPI IDs for those who would like to come forward and contribute. They, along with other information, are in the description of the video. A small contribution you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. So please continue to show your love and support. That's it from me. See you again next time.